тут хто місцеві більш загартовані, ніж ми. Але ми, я думаю, що після хорошого обіду можемо починати нашу роботу. І я передаю слово наступному нашому модератору Райнгарду Ключику і запрошую панелістів до столу, і ми будемо продовжувати.
Yeah, so welcome after lunchtime. Hope everybody is awake. Nobody falls asleep. It's our job to have an interesting discussion so that nobody falls asleep. We have a very interesting topic now, the eastern border of Europe and the future relations to Russia, or the Moscovitan colonial empire. And to discuss this topic, I have four speakers, only gentlemen. The ladies are sitting in the audience. They are listening to us, but after our discussion here on the panel, you will have the chance to ask questions and make some comments. So please listen to what we are saying. Don't forget, think about questions you can ask, because we want to have a real discussion, not only speeches. I said we have four gentlemen here. I start on the right side. This is Yuri Honcharenko, head of Infolight, Ukraine, Research and Analysis Group, and chairman of the Ukrainian Security Gap. Thanks for coming. The next gentleman on my right side is Jura Mesic. He comes from Slovakia, is honorary consul of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria to Slovakia. His education was a medical doctor, but he had a very interesting career, also working for the World Bank in Washington and other places. And I would say he's an expert for what we call the ex or post-Soviet area. On my left side, I have Mr. Tigran Kazmalian. I hope the pronunciation is understandable. From Armenia. From Panaropa, Armenia, but also politically active in Armenia. But his origin is a filmmaker. So if you are looking for any documentaries about, for example, the genocide on Armenians people, then you will find his name as the producer of one of these documentaries. Welcome here. And on my left side, David Dondur. He comes from Georgia. Was a diplomat. His last post was in Vienna, and then he quit this position because of some developments, you all know about it, in his home country in Georgia, and created the EU Awareness Center. So he is teaching about and explaining the situation not only in Georgia but in a geopolitical context, and this is also what we will talk about now here on this panel. And I would like to start with Jura Mesic, because Jura Mesic has a short presentation about the region we are talking about, so to give us some introduction. Jura?
Thank you very much. I usually stand, so. We are supposed to speak about the eastern border of Europe and the future relationship with post-Russia. That's how was this session announced. So I created this short presentation. So we get some understanding what we are talking about in geographic, demographic, and few other aspects. And I apologize to Ukrainian participants who are majority here and who probably know most of what I'm going to summarize. Well, Russia created by conquest, kept together by terror, lent people possible breakdown lines. These are the 5 topics I want to speak. What is Europe? What is Russia? Basic geography, demography, ethnic evolution of Russian territory in the second half of 20th century, urbanization and empty countryside. 2 case studies, Komi Republic and Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, and 1 slide on conclusions. So, everybody who learned geography knows that there is a border between Europe and Asia, and it goes alongside the Ural Mountains, and then Ural River, and then Caspian Sea, and then some people say the Caucasus is the border, and some say no, the southern Caucasus is part of Europe, which culturally, without any doubt, is reality. So this is a geographic, but this is arbitrary. In reality, it's one large Eurasian continent. Unlike Russia, Europe has borders. The European Russia, that means territory between current western borders of Russia and Ural Mountains, is pretty large. It's around 4 million square kilometers, and it is inhabited by something like 105 million people, but still has very low population density, 27 people per square kilometers versus Ukraine's 67 and Europe's over 100 people. So it's already European part of Russia is very empty from the population perspective. Well, administratively it's divided into 58 so-called federal subjects. I put federal always in marks because there is no federation in Russia. It's a centralistic authoritarian regime, and as so many things on Russia are entirely fake, it is fake-deration, not federation. And then the Asian Russia, which is a bigger part, but is even more sparsely populated. Now, let me move to ethnic structure of the population of Russia. This map shows the ethnic structure in 1941. Note the pink color. That's the territory of the map is former Soviet Union, so it includes the Central Asian republics and Southern Caucasus and Baltic states, and of course Ukraine. But only pink part on that map is territory where ethnic Russians were majority of population. And you see that was part of Northeast Asia and Northeast Europe, so territory west of northern Urals. But also if you look at, let's say, Kuban region, you see that Kuban was mostly Ukrainian in 1941. And there were many other ethnic groups. Russians were inhabiting only a relatively small part, or quite small part, of Russia. Now we move 60 years later, and it's, you know, if you look at this map, you see clearly that Russians are majority in much larger territory. There are still large territories in northern Russia where they are not, where ethnic Russians are minority. And of course also in the North Caucasus region and in central Volga region. But this is a map made on the individual rayons, districts. If you look at the federal subjects map, it seems that the Russians are minority everywhere, or almost everywhere in Russia, except for the parts which are in green and yellow colors. And you know, the largest part where Russians are not minority is Sakha, Yakutia, but then you see Tiva, Tatarstan, Bashkortostan, Chuvashia, Dagestan, Chechnya, Ingushetia, Northern Ossetia, and two more so-called federal subjects. So by this, already this way how the federal subjects are formed, they are created to assure that the ethnic Russians are majority in those territories. Even when we looked at the previous, they are not the majority. Russian ethnic dominance over that huge territory was made possible by extremely low population, and that, of course, is the main reason for that is extremely cold climate. In so sparsely populated territories, one gulag camp or one military garrison can completely change ethnic composition of the large territory, and that's how the Russian dominance became. This is a map which shows the second most numerous distribution, second most numerous ethnic group living also within the territory of Russia, which are Turkic nations. Among them are Tatars, officially 4.7 million, Bashkirs, Chuvash, Kumiks, Yakuts. One more important feature of Russia is hyper-urbanization. This map shows the cities of Russia, which are over 1 million people. And there are 16 such cities in Russia, inhabited by 35 million people together, which is 1/4 of Russian population. 1/4 of Russian population lives in cities over 1 million people. In the European Union, there are 15 cities over 1 million people, but European Union has 3 times bigger population, and only 6.5% of EU population lives in the cities over 1 million. Hyper concentration of people, which in several cities, which makes the countryside of Russia even more less densely populated or more sparsely populated. 2 case studies. The Komi Republic, so-called republic, Komi territory of Russia Federation, has a size of 420,000 square kilometers, which is approximately size of Germany or Sweden, but the population 740,000 people. And more than half of that population live in just 3 towns. In 1926, so 100 years ago roughly, Komi people, Komi are Ugro-Finnic or Uralic ethnic group, represented 87% of population of the territory, and Russians were 12%. Today, Komi are 22% and Russians are 70%. How it happened? Oh, very simply. You just need to put several gulag camps and put there several 100,000 people. And that's what happened. First camps, and then those camps were transformed into the towns like Ukhta, Vorkuta, Pechora, gulag towns. They completely changed ethnic structure of Komi Republic. This region is currently going through fast depopulation. In just 11 years, between 2010 and 2021, officially population went down by -18%. For Europeans, it's like if Czech Republic went from 10 million to 10.5 million people to 8 million people. It's a dramatic drop in 10 years. The other regions of the European part of Russia's north, which are Arkhangelsk regions, Karelia and Murmansk region, are dropping incomparable level. Arkhangelsk and Karelia lost 17% of population. Murmansk region 16% population. This already extremely sparsely inhabited territory is losing population very, very fast. The people are escaping that territory. Well, this is distribution of Uralic languages. or known in Europe as Ugro-Finn languages. And you see that originally these languages were dominant languages in large part of what is current Russian North and Ural region, also in European part. The second case I want to mention is Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, which is very small, 16,000 square kilometers, 1.5 million people, so comparable, more or less comparable to Чернівецький region or some oblast, similar oblast. Now, demographically, very interesting development. In 1926, there were 67% of the population were Chechens, ethnic Chechens, and Russians were 23%. In 1944, after the February 1944 to be exact, the Chechen population went to 0.0%. And you know what happened. The whole Chechen and Ingush nation were completely deported from their homeland, moved to Kazakhstan and other parts of then Soviet Union, and only individual people called abreks surviving in wilderness Chechens were continue living there. Very, very few individuals. Then in 1959, after repatriation of deported Chechens was allowed, they started to return from Chechnya, and the population of Chechens was 40%, but Russians were, of course, majority in that territory, because when the Chechens were deported, Russians and other ethnic groups were moving in. In 1989, when Chechen population was already majority, 66%, and Russians were 25%, then again, you know, what followed were Russo-Chechen wars in 1990s, and consequently, during those wars, actually, very many of Russians were killed by Russian bombing. You know, when they indiscriminately bombed Grozny, which, you know, before Mariupol there was Grozny, a city erased to the ground. And among the victims were many Russians. Consequently, the population of ethnic Russians dramatically decreased. And currently, there are maybe 1% of Russians, and almost 99 or 98% of the population are ethnic Chechens. Now, contrary to Komi Republic, which I mentioned before, the Chechen Republic is one of the regions with one of the fastest growing population. The population of Ichkeria increased by 19%, and it's second only after Moscow and Ingushetia, which is neighboring that. So, and from legal perspective, as that was the topic of previous panel, Russians consider Chechen Republic Ichkeria one of their regions. But from the Chechen perspective, that's not true. From the Chechen perspective, Ichkeria is independent country, temporarily occupied by Russians, because they never entered Russian so-called federation. After the disintegration of Soviet Union, Ichkeria declared independence, and before Russia declared independence, and they never joined Russia. Anyhow, this map is from my book, which I understand will be available. The Ukrainian edition, which was published recently, will be available for participants this afternoon or maybe tomorrow. This is hypothetical scenario of Russia's disintegration, triggered by economic devastation and military defeat in Ukraine. Why I believe that, well, I'm quite certain that Russia will disintegrate. Well, there is a historical pattern. After each military defeat, Russia disintegrates or is losing territories. And actually it started with this Crimean War. You may recall that Russia lost Alaska as a direct consequence of the Crimean War, when the Tsar was basically forced by economic consequences of the war to sell Alaska to Americans. And I believe that after the war, which actually started by Russian occupation of Crimea, the Russia will disintegrate. How it will disintegrate, that's a matter of many discussions and speculations. But the important point for all of us is we must debate this upcoming disintegration of Russia. And I'm telling this often to our West European or North American partners who avoid even allowing themselves to think about the possibility of Russia's disintegration. And I remind them all the time, you know, in 1989, you failed in anticipating of collapse of communism in Europe. All these excellent analysts, politologists, political scientists in Harvard and Oxford, Cambridge, Sorbonne, Stanford, they failed. They were not anticipating that communism will collapse. 2 years later, they failed to anticipate collapse of Soviet Union. They are so committed to the status quo in their minds, intellectually, that they fail to anticipate these important movements. And I think, I'm quite sure, that they are victims, the analytics in the West are still victims of the same commitment to status quo, to what they learned at the schools, they continue to repeat it. And the risk is that when the disintegration of Russia comes, we meaning the political elites in the Western countries, will not be prepared for disintegration of Russia. And if that will be the case, then many mistakes will be done, as were done when the Soviet Union collapsed. Would the West recognize independence of Ichkeria then? Independence of Tatarstan was declared. They then stepped back. But if Tatar elites, would they see that Ichkeria was recognized, they would stand their position. And that would trigger disintegration of Russia in the 1990s. And we would avoid wars in Chechnya and the current war in Ukraine, and of course occupation of South Ossetia and Abkhazia and Pridnestrovia. That wouldn't happen. It only happened because Russia was left to continue its existence. Anyhow, how the disintegration of Russia will go, that very much depends on how the local elites will behave, but also how the European and the Western democratic elites of democracies will behave, and how well prepared for such scenario they will be. And how courageous they will be in taking responsibility about some of those territories, because the territories which are in blue colors, they do not have real chance for national independence. They do not have human particularly human resources to create independent states. On that territory, which is Chumaka, which is abbreviation from Chukotka, Kamchatka, Magadan, lives less than 500,000 people. In that large blue territory, which I call American Arctic territory, is 230,000 people. These are the population of towns, but the territories are territories equal to Canada's or Australia. Anyhow, my summary: vast territory of the Eastern Europe, known today as Russia, is ethnically very diverse. It's created by conquest, kept together by a massive repressive apparatus. It will disintegrate. Its disintegration will combine process of decolonization of conquered nations and regional emancipation around major urban centers. Northern half of this territory is extremely sparsely populated, with some large regions without realistic chance for statehood. Maybe we should, we meaning Western countries, should consider approach after the First World War, when the mandatory territories were created. The point is, if Europe and America don't step in, those territories will not remain wilderness. They will be taken over by other players. And the other player is China. So if Americans do not take initiative in Southeast Asia, then they will have China 80 kilometers from Alaska across the Bering Strait. They should think about that region, not about Greenland. Final disintegration and decolonization of Russian Empire will be triggered by consequences of Crimean War of 21st century. Part of the war reparations to Ukraine and her allies could be paid by depopulated territories of Northern Eurasia. Thank you very much for your attention. Apologies for being too long and maybe too scholarly or academic, how to describe it. But I think it's good to see maps, to have some idea about the territory we speak about, and to work with numbers, because well, after all, mathematics governs very many things in our lives, probably all.
For you. Thank you, Jura. When we are talking about the border, the eastern border of Europe and the neighbor Russia, and this was very important to get an image. What is this Russia? What is this neighbor Russia? It's not a homogeneous country. It's completely different to a homogeneous country, and also the development in this country will influence the situation of the border and also the situation in Europe and America, as you mentioned in the end, because there is other powers who will intervene. When I go back a little bit, then we had a border of Russia which was somewhere in Central Europe, time of the Iron Curtain. And nobody, as you mentioned, wanted to predict that this Iron Curtain will break down, and then 2 years later that the Soviet Union will break down. We have two gentlemen from, or three gentlemen from former Soviet, four gentlemen from former Soviet bloc countries, sorry, but three of them being part of Soviet Empire. Georgia became independent, Armenia became independent. Both countries, or more Georgia than Armenia, went away into the European Union, direction to the European Union. But now what we see is a development that goes into the other direction as far as we can watch. A new government over there with an oligarch who is very close to Moscow and Putin regime. On the other hand, we see a population which is demonstrating now for more than how many days? 300 and something days daily against this regime. David, may I ask you, what is the future of Georgia and what role does it play in this border region between Russia and Europe, and where does Georgia belong to?
Good afternoon, first of all, and thank you for the invitation. It's an honor and pleasure to be here on Pан'європейська conference. I'll shift the focus of your question with your permission, Reinhard. first defining what how we Georgians see the eastern frontier and how we see our role here. In my first life I was a geographer, and it was quite exciting for me to watch on the maps that you and I have presented, but what I have to say now, the map is not helpful, because eastern frontier is not a line on a map, nor some geographical boundary, but rather moral and political frontier. On one side of this frontier is Europe, based on sovereignty, rule of law, unity, and on the other side is Russia, which still defines its security based on subjugation and domination over the neighbors. And this frontier is not a fixed line. It shifts depending on certain developments on the continent. Now, this frontier runs through here: Ukraine, Moldova, Armenia, Georgia, 4 countries, 4 nations facing different political realities, as you mentioned, but united in European destiny. And we should not be looked from Central Europe as a periphery. We are actually the testing ground of the principles that defines Europe itself. And our struggle is not just a national struggle, but about defining the very idea of Europe. That's why what happens in Georgia, in Armenia, here in Ukraine or Moldova, it resonates all over Europe. So don't think, yes, geographically for Europe we are far east of Europe, but don't consider us as neighbors, but rather co-authors of European future order. And supporting our region, our countries, in helping us to be more resilient to external threats, to strengthen our sovereignty and democratic institutions. It's not an act of generosity from the side of Europe, but rather risk-free investment with very high interest rate that Europe will get by securing its eastern frontier and to build a bastion against different kind of threats that are coming from the east and from the south. And in the very center of here, the central challenge in this process is, of course, Russia, as it is the case in the last several decades. So Russia's war in Ukraine has shattered the post-Cold War order beyond repair. And it's not only war in Ukraine, but also other developments over the one big ocean also contributed to it. And let's be honest, the days of Belle Epoque, modern Belle Epoque for Europe is over. The days of relatively low-cost Russian gas and significantly discounted US security guarantees are gone. Now Europe is its own, and it should build its security based on its unity and strengths. And key here is to secure its eastern frontier. Therefore, the new relations, the future relations with Russia should start first and foremost by providing credible security guarantees to the countries I have mentioned, and only doing this and securing Europe's east, Europe should consider other ways beyond deterrence. So I would rather call it containment with engagement. I mean, the future relations with Russia should be conditional upon Russia dropping its imperial ambitions and internal reforms. So to sum up, now on the agenda should be securing eastern frontier, supporting first and foremost Ukraine, as well as Moldova, Armenia, Georgia, and by doing so laying the foundation for the new Europe. And about Georgia I can elaborate later during the discussion, during the conversation.
Let me come back to the founding father of the Pan-European Union, Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi, who of course tried to make a definition of the borders of Europe. And he said, okay, in the west it's clear, it's the Atlantic Ocean. In that time, 100 years ago, when he created Pan-Europa, Great Britain, he saw it outside of Europe because of the big colonial empire. In the north, it's also clear, there is the North Pole. In the south, it's also clear, there is the Mediterranean Sea. But in the east, it will be a cultural and a political border that has to be defined, because geography cannot define this border, otherwise Ural, which is the geographical border, would be Europe, and everything behind the Ural would not be Europe. Therefore, thank you also for all the things you mentioned, and when you said that Georgia is more Europe than a neighbor to Europe. On my left side, I have Tigran Xmarian from Armenia, and I want to ask you, because Armenia has a little bit, not only a little bit, has the reputation of being an ally of Russia for several reasons, religion, other connects, economically, etc. We see that your president has very good contacts to Moscow, at least in what he shows when he goes to visits to Moscow, or this is the impression we get in the West from Armenia. Where is the political, or into which direction is Armenia going politically?
Thank you, Mr. Kluchik. Firstly, I would like to express gratitude from our little delegation, which consists of head of Pan-Europe Armenia, Mr. Avitik Lukasyan, who is also honorary consul of Estonia to Armenia, and myself, Tigran Khazmalian, who is the chairman of European Party of Armenia. So, going back to our spiritual founding father, von Kalergi, his vision was free of geographical curse, as my Georgian colleague emphasized. Yes, Europe is not about geography. What is it all about then? It's about values. It's about European civilization based on human rights, based on common values, based on international law. So right now, right here, we are in Ukraine, because Ukraine is shaping a civilization border of Europe. With what? With Russia? No. With Asia. Of course, Asia is not another geographical curse, because there are countries like Japan, Mongolia, Taiwan, etc., etc. But we mean collective West, as Putin likes to put it on, because European civilization is based on a human being, on a value of human rights. and versus the idol of state, of a tribe, which is violating humanity, violating human being, violating human value. So where are we on this map? If Ukraine is shaping eastern frontier of European civilization, with my Georgian colleague, we are shaping southeastern border of it. We are not Southern Caucasus or Transcaucasia as it used to be called. We have to define this as SEE, Southeastern Europe, together with Ukraine and Moldova, Georgia and Armenia, because we are fighting for, we're representing this very idea of European civilization on its southeastern border. And that's why we're under the same pressure. We went through the war which you are fighting right now. Georgia in 2008, Armenia in 2016, then 2020, and 2023. So we have to remember one thing. This is one and the same colonial war. It's not different wars that Russia is waging against us all. This is one common war, and we are different fronts. And sooner we realize this, the better for us, because the sooner we'll become not just friends, colleagues, we should be allies in this fight. Unfortunately, Georgia first and then Armenia is following this. Armenia is not a country or nation, but rather as a government. Yes, we are surrounding now. Georgia Dream did it in 6 years. Russia bribed political elite using handful of $1 million instead of billions that West were investing, trying to change, to reinforce the infrastructure. So it's very cheap to buy few sons of a bitch, sorry. And in Armenia it happened even faster. It took 5 to 6 months, approximately since May 2025, when Prime Minister Pashinyan stopped to imitate Euro integration, and now he's practicing the same Euro imitation that was so classically performed by Georgian dream. Right now, Armenia is turning this Georgian dream in Armenian nightmare. We are going the same way, not as a nation. We are here because we are resisting. And unlike European Union with its bureaucratic burden, Pan-European movement still gives us intellectual freedom to define this, to learn this, and to fight this, because when von Kalergi showed his vision of future Pan-Europe, he was mocked by no other than Hitler, who called him disillusionist and bastard. Yes, where is Hitler now? We are in Pan-Europe movement. The same Hitler said, who remembers of extermination of Armenians? We are still here. And that's why we are coming here to Ukraine to express not only our solidarity with your struggle. We are here to say that we are doing almost the same. This struggle is a part of your struggle, and it's not just a word for your and our freedom. This is reality, because if you lose your struggle, we will lose our independence. And the last idea which I would like to share with you is that there is illusion that democracies could ally with dictatorship. what is going now in Ukraine, it's what I used to call patrioticide, because Russians are trying to deprive Ukraine from the very idea of being Ukrainian, of your language and culture, of your cultural and historical identity. This is something which was practiced with Armenians for decades and decades. Last time it happened just 2 years ago, when patrioticide as a final phase of genocide was practiced in ancient Christian region of Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh as we called it. And just one reminder, a day before invasion of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin invited to Kremlin one political leader. It was Ilham Aliyev. And I just want you to see this as not just a symbol, as a sign of that democracies should be together against dictatorship, because dictatorship could imitate allies with democracies, just like our countries, Georgia and Armenia, are right now imitating being democratic. We are here to say it loud. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for this message from Armenia. You mentioned that the colonial war, and that it's not only one colonial war, but it's a colonial war in this whole region, which you call Southeast Europe, which would be another historic question, because when we talk about Southeast Europe from a Vienna perspective, we talk about the Balkans. When you take Brussels, and in Brussels they have a working group for Southeast Europe, then they are talking about San Marino. So depending on the point where you are, the definition of Southeast Europe is a little bit different. However, I know what you mean. We are here in a country which is in a war, and I would say it is in a colonial war, because the gentleman, no, he's not a gentleman, sorry, the gangster in Moscow wants to restore a colonial empire, and therefore he needs Ukraine. And in a short conversation we had yesterday, you said you are in it's a defensive democracy on the eastern flank of Europe. Mr. Honcharenko, what would for you be the eastern border of Europe and the future relation to Russia?
Дякую за питання. Я буду єдиний україномовний на цій панелі і якби представлятиму тут Україну. З вашого дозволу, я ще нотував першу панель, і десь в тому, що зараз буду говорити, буду користуватися своїми нотатками з першої панелі. Отже, щодо кордону, тут, що важливо зазначити, малювалися карти, але правильно тут згадувалося, що кордон, східний кордон Європи в певний момент, якщо не докласти зусиль, кордон демократії, не географічного поняття, а саме демократії, може пролягати приблизно там, де був кордон залізна завіса. Тому якщо ми всі східний кордон не станемо сильними там, де він зараз проходить, то кордон може посунутися, і ці країни можуть бути знову повернутися в підплив Росії чи бути просто фізично анексовані. Другий момент, ви згадали оборону демократію, це власне про те, що демократія, і перша панель про це багато говорила, має бути сильною. І тут баланс права, сили права і сили, власне, як не тільки військової, інформаційної, бо зараз війна, вона в якомусь сенсі дійсно переходить в інші площини, і війна набуває нових рис, і, власне, Україна демонструє світу, і, напевно, десь в Україні можна сказати, що ми вчимося на своєму жорстокому і важкому досвіді, як захищати демократію. І, власне, ми маємо поєднати демократію, зберігати відданість цінностям і, власне, силу, щоб захистити це збереження. І тут перед нами постають, наприклад, такі виклики, з якими ми стикаємося в Україні. Україні і, власне, як наш ворог використовує демократію проти нас самих. Ну, наприклад, нам зараз один з частих закидів, які агенти впливу Росії всередині України використовують, про те, що нібито в нас нелегітимна влада. Якщо дивитися з точки зору формальної, то терміни, коли мали відбутися вибори, ніби ж пройшли, да? Але воєнний стан провести легітимні вибори неможливо, і це от як Росія один з елементів, які вони вдало використовують. І під це підпадають частина людей всередині країни, під це підпадає те, що в нас відбувається з такою важкою сферою, як мобілізація, де також використовуються ці всі терміни. До чого я веду? До того, що якщо ми будемо, не скажу, що творчо, але об'єктивно до реальності ставитися до вимог того, що нам диктує війна, якщо ми будемо формалістами в плані дотримання законів, ми гарантовано це обернеться проти нас і ми програємо. Також відповідно, що право без сили, воно є нічим. Так само в інформаційній сфері на попередній панелі нагадували про вибори в Румунії, де дійсно той кандидат, який мав би формально перемогти, румуни не змогли себе захистити. Да? Вибори в Німеччині, там теж складна ситуація була, і вороги європейськості Німеччини, вони набирають силу. Ще можна згадати деякі нещодавні вибори, і в такий спосіб можна зрозуміти, що в цілком легітимний спосіб Путін може посунути кордони, використовуючи влади демократії. Те, що було колись силою демократії, може стати, якщо ми будемо неадекватні викликам, може ставати її слабкістю. І, власне, щодо союзів, також можна згадати досвід Другої світової війни, коли певні країни міняли, да? Наприкінці війни переходили в інший бік і ставали на бік переможців. Тому, якщо повернутися до першої доповіді, де були цікаві карти, я би хотів на це відрефлексувати, що Росія у нас що робить? Коли йдуть цифри про те, скільки там є русських, да, то вже певний час росіяни до русських записують зовсім не русських. І, власне, цифра русських там може бути від 0 до 100% в будь-якому регіоні. І цей експеримент робив Сталін по створенню совєтського народу. Тепер Путін робить по створенню русських, де, власне, етнічних русських може і не бути. І завершуючи, хотів би також наголосити, що цю зброю можна також розвернути і проти них, і, власне, пробуджуючи національну свідомість, і не тільки, я би сказав, народів не ті, які не корінні, да? А, власне, і можна з русскими говорити, що ви також вже не русські і вас знищують. Тому є по своїй діяльності, там, ми стикаємося, наприклад, там є такий проєкт «Африканські деревні». Наприклад, під Москвою я бачив сам ці ролики, сидять такі мешканці, здається, з Конго, в косоворотках, і говорять, що вони русські. Да, я русський, там їхні діти такі ж самі, кажуть, що вони русські. І я не закликаю, тобто, щоб мене зрозуміли правильно, як до якихось етнічних там використання елементів, проте в якомусь сенсі ми все ж таки маємо бути цинічними щодо цього, і якщо це нам допомагає захистити демократію, то оці всі вади я би також використовував, бо інакше ми програємо.
Let me be a little bit provocative. I come from a Western European country or a Central European country. I come from a country where the population is very skeptical about EU enlargement. I don't know the figures about Slovakia, but I know that also in other countries in the European Union there is not such a big enthusiasm for further enlargement because of several experience we had to make. And there are many people who have no idea what Georgia is, have no idea what Armenia is. They even don't have an idea what Ukraine is. So if I ask you, how would you explain to a normal Western European citizen why does your country belong to the European Union? Yeah.
Well, if you ask a provocative question, let me give you a provocative answer. I have an honor to represent here the oldest European country because Armenia was a kingdom which was ally of Roman Empire when Germany, Brittany, France were only colonies. You were not even states at that moment. So 2000 years ago, my country was the founding father together with, not Italy, with Roman Empire which disappears. So first of all, we have at least two answers to your question. Firstly, we were Europeans when there was no Europe, because Roman Empire was a founding father of European Union. Secondly, we are first Christian nation. And I don't want to be religiously whatever, but let's not forget that in the center of pan-European symbol is a cross, and it's not just a geometrical figure. This is about Christianity. Are you practicing Christian or not? But Christianity is a system of values which made us Europeans, which is different from Islam for the very same reasons why European civilization is based on human rights, idea of personal freedom. And left to me is sitting not just my neighbor, keen national Georgian. We were together through all these years. So in these terms, we're much more Europeans than many current European nations. And the last thing, for many of you Europeans from Western Europe, Central Europe, European Union is just an option, political option, economic option. For Georgia and Armenia, it's a matter of survival. Without being members of European Union, we will not survive in 21st century.
Thank you for this question. If you ask me, is Georgia Europe or not, by all means. My short answer is by all means. Georgia is Europe because of its history, culture, religion, values, principles, beliefs. Georgia is Europe politically because it's a candidate country of the European Union, but neither of these important now. I want to focus your attention on that in modern world, what happens in Georgia or what happens in Armenia does not stay anymore in Georgia and Armenia. It has a spillover effect with repercussions in Central Europe and further in West Europe. Now, in Ukraine, Russia is waging full-scale war. But this war was preceded by annexation of Crimea and the occupation of Donbass 8 years ago. That campaign was preceded 8 years earlier by invasion of Georgia and occupation of 20% of our territories. But to be honest, 2008 August war did not come out of blue for us. We were actually expecting it. And we learned that this war will come in February 2007 when Putin delivered his speech at Munich Security Conference. I was there, by the way, in Bayerischhof. And while Putin was speaking, I was watching the reaction of the audience, half of US Congress, NATO SecGen, and all European leaders in the front rows on this conference hall. And everybody was ironizing, mocking, he is bluffing, he is not capable to do it. And when he finished his words, I was together with my minister, we said to each other that war is coming. Countdown has started. It was so clear what he said that it left no question marks. Some say that Putin is very unpredictable. If you ask me, he is the most predictable leader I have ever met. He always sincerely announces what he is going to do. The problem is that we don't want to believe him. So we were expected, and when we tried to raise awareness of, raise alarm of our partners, we were told that, oh, come on, you are paranoid like Baltics. He is not Stalin, Russia is not Soviet Union, they don't have resources. And then Russia invaded Georgia. And again, we said that, you see, we were warning you. Oh no, you should have been more cautious, you provoked him. But come on, it's not about provocation. Unlike Reinhard, I was not raised in a religious family, but I was born and bred in Soviet Union. So I knew from my childhood that devil exists. And devil does not need a pretext. The devil is devil because it acts on its whims and wishes, and not our behavior. And our message to our partners was, Russia came to Georgia not to grab Tskhinvali and Sukhumi. They anyway were controlling it. Nothing has changed. They came to Georgia for two reasons. One, to undermine the very foundation of security architecture of Europe. And second, to test the West reaction of its action. Russia never does anything without testing, testing what will be the reaction. And when there was no reaction, I would say zero, maybe zero, not because we received some financial and humanitarian assistance, but it was just to help us, not to just to survive. And Russia stayed completely unpunished. And we knew, and they even got some bonuses, like Sochi Olympics, resumption of NATO, Russia Council that was on hold for several years, Nord Stream 1, by the way. And we said that if you don't stop Russia now in Georgia, they will go further. And the next will be Crimea. That's what we were saying. And if you don't stop Russia in Crimea, then will be Kiev. And if you don't stop them in Kiev, they eventually come and knock on NATO doors to check the credibility of Article 5. Like a prophets, we were saying it, but there was no prophecy. We were just simply analyzing analytically the statements, speeches, their revision of doctrines and concepts without any ChatGPT and Gemini. No AI, just HI, human intelligence. It was so clear, everything was on the table, you just needed to put pieces together. So these are not isolated cases. War in Georgia, war in Crimea, war in Ukraine, and now Russia is waging a war in multiple directions. in some countries without using missiles, in other countries using other means, disinformation, manipulation, economic coercion, political subversion, and soft power. So what Russia failed in August 2008, Russian tanks were in 50 kilometers from the capital of my country, just 1 hour drive. But appearance of 5 European leaders in the front central square of Tbilisi, including then Ukrainian president, thank you for him, and the televised statement of US president stopped the advance. But what they failed to take by tanks, later they did it using disinformation, propaganda, and soft power. And as a result, if by war they managed just 20% of our country, now they occupy 100% of our state institutions and our government. This war here in Ukraine will stop, hopefully rather sooner than later. But that war, the hybrid war, Russia's hybrid war, will not stop. It will continue, and it will only double, so you have to be ready for that. And why this war is treacherous, and I'm coming, why every country matters. Why this war is treacherous? Because it has you cannot build physical boundaries. Its penetration capacity is far richer than of any weapon of mass destruction. And it does not matter country is small or big, member of NATO or member of the EU. Article 5, nuclear umbrella, is useless in this war. So every country, Armenia, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, matters. If one falls, others will follow. And in this war, we are all Europeans. Je suis Europe.
I think this was very important what you mentioned, because it's not only a war which is fought with weapons, or normal weapons, shooting at each other, it's also a hybrid war going against all the European countries. We see that in Austria with a massive disinformation campaign coming from Russia. We have political parties in the European Parliament. Think about this group, the Patriots of Europe, Orban and colleagues. They are standing on the side of Putin. Whenever you watch them, what they do in the European Parliament, how they block sanctions, how they block any initiatives fighting the hybrid war of Putin against the European Union. So thank you for that. This hybrid war is, I would say, the bigger danger for the European Union countries than an attack with a drone, because a drone is seen by everybody. It falls down or is shot down. But the hybrid war comes very smart into your mind and your brain and is destroying it, and with the partners they have in the European Union, that makes it even worse. Mr. Honcharenko, why is Ukraine European? I mean, you have the same letters as the Russians, your language sounds like the Russians. I don't understand one word when you speak Ukrainian. I don't understand one word when a Russian speaks Russian. I mean, that's not my opinion, yeah, but this is what people, what I often hear. It's the same. Is it the same? No, I don't think so.
Розумію ваше питання, проте, якби, якщо піти шляхом, як говорив колега з Вірменії, то, в принципі, коли була Україна і ми були європейською країною, то там в Москві жаби квакали, тому, в принципі, нам є що відповісти на це, насправді це дуже легко. А чому ми Європа, то я думаю, що наразі при повазі до всіх інших країн, напевно, Україна зараз завдяки своїм збройним Збройним силам, завдяки всьому опору українського народу, найбільше довела, що ми Європа, тому що, по-перше, якщо трошки ретроспективно ще далі за Мюнхенську конференцію, то можна пригадати спробу тодішнього президента Кучми заявити, що Україна не Росія, і наслідки для нього, як його швиденько, не швиденько, але поступово привели до ситуації, що він перестав опиратися цьому. Потім фактично фізична війна в нас почалася з того, що український народ, громадянське суспільство вийшло з протестом, власне, з гаслом «Україна – це Європа». Тобто, тут просто вже війна почалася з цього. Війна почалася в Києві на Майдані Незалежності, і в цьому є і докази безпосередньої участі росіян, їхніх спецслужб у фізичному вимірі цієї війни, а вимір інший, він триває. Можна згадати наші визвольні змагання сторічної давнини, можна згадати українську повстанську. Якщо я зараз почну перераховувати все, що робила Україна, щоб довести, що ми не Росія і ми не хочемо бути з Росією, то часу ні сьогоднішньої конференції, ні завтрашньої не вистачить. Тому я думаю, що з цим в нас якраз проблем немає, і ми б дуже хотіли, щоб наш приклад спонукав інші країни, передусім Східної Європи, Балтики, зрозуміти, що загроза як ніколи близька до переходу війни до них у фізичному вимірі. І якщо реально ми не об'єднаємося і країни Європи не посиляться, то це в фізичному, кінетичному вимірі будуть доводити всі країни. Ми б цього не хотіли, ми б хотіли, щоб у нас фізичний вимір війни закінчився, і ми пішли по тих кордонах і встановлювати підмандатні території. В принципі, в нас є різні версії, як поділити Росію. Ми, думаю, домовимося з цим.
Now I will give you an argument for discussion with Austrians, and not only you, but also the audience, the Ukrainian audience here, because in Austria we have many people who say, why should we support Ukraine? And a good answer could be, because we supported you. In 1918, it was grain from Ukraine, which helped people in Austria not to starve. This is history, but it is a fact. It's a historic fact. Now I give the floor to Jure Mesik, and while he is speaking, I will look into the audience, because as mentioned, we will also have the chance to ask questions and comments. So I will have a look into the audience. Raise your hands. I saw already two, but before that, Jure, take your microphone.
Well, the original question was the Ukraine and European integration and the attitudes of people who are now part of the European Union to this. Well, there are two, I would say, main international groups that Ukraine is aspiring, joining European Union and NATO. When asked the question about Ukraine and NATO, my answer typically is, well, there is one country in NATO, and it is Ukraine. Currently, Ukraine equals NATO. NATO was created as a defense against Russian imperialism. And the key country which is playing this role is Ukraine. And Ukraine has some allies in that, but the key player is Ukraine. Ukraine is NATO. Obviously, the NATO bureaucrats and other people don't understand it yet, but that's the simple truth. Ukraine is fulfilling NATO's mission. Concerning EU, I think there is a paradox effect of the war is that Ukrainians are currently the most interlinked people with other Europeans, and that's because of the because of millions of Ukrainian people, in particular women, but also men, living and working in various European countries. There is no other so numerous and organized and active diaspora within European Union than Ukrainian. And it is a big asset of Ukraine and a big asset for the future of Ukraine. Ukraine, which 10 years ago was really very little understood in West European countries, a little bit more in Central European and Central East European countries, but just a little bit more. But very little in West. Now is, well, everybody knows there is Ukraine, there are Ukrainians who are heroically fighting against Russian invasion. People are interacting with Ukrainian people, the children have schoolmates, Ukrainian schoolmates at schools and so on. There is very intensive communication between Ukrainian and members of other European nations, which is very important. And it is very important for the legal and political integration or accession of Europe to European Union. Humanly, or many millions of Ukrainians are living in European Union, and it is creating a soil also for the political, economic and other integrations. Being Slovak, I can tell you that there is no debate about it. Even Fico, who, as we all know, is a basically Russian agent, a result of strategic corruption, a success story of strategic corruption in Europe. That's current Prime Minister of Slovakia. Nevertheless, even he is not questioning European Union future of Ukraine, because having our experience, the Slovak experience, what it meant for Slovakia to become member of European Union. And there were many concerns, let's say our neighboring Austria, oh, we accept them and then they will come here and criminality will increase, and all these sentiments were there.
And they will take our jobs.
Exactly. And the result is that the Eastern Austria is flourishing and growing economically because it's benefiting from the open border and trade and migration of people and so on. And there is understanding among Slovak political elites that this will be also a result of the Ukrainian accession to European Union, that it will help to develop the Eastern Slovakia, which within the Slovak geography is the lagging region of Slovakia. So there is pragmatic support for Ukrainian membership in the EU. There are questions, but your soils are so productive that our agriculture is unable to compete with Ukrainian agriculture. So there will be lobbies against it and so on. And it's much worse in case of Poland, where the agricultural lobby is much stronger. There will be difficulties, but the whole history of European Union is history of permanent crisis. I remember when I lived in Washington in early 2000s, the September 11 crisis and then the war against Iraq. And France did not join coalition of willing. The big titles in New York Times, Washington Post and other media of the time, the Fox News did not exist yet, where something like Europe is not existing anymore, Europe is collapsing, Europe is in deep crisis. The life is constant crisis. Political life is life of democracy is constant crisis. never-ending effort to solve challenges, new problems, and so on. So we just need to understand that the democracies are complicated, and it's very easy to say that this is disaster. No, they prove to have a capacity to solve problems. The truth is that in the war conditions they are slow. But again, historical example. I was born in Czechoslovakia. A historical trauma of Czechoslovakia was Munich Treaty in 1938. Nobody, we had the formal alliances with France and Britain. They were our formal allies. Yet they came to Munich and their prime minister signed this treaty, and then the Neville Chamberlain was waving on the London airport, "I brought you peace of our times." Well, within half a year the bombs were dropping on London. But we were betrayed. That is a national trauma which continues among Czechs and Slovaks, at least those who remember history. And when we compare current behavior of European nations to 1938, I see progress. There is significant progress. So, when we see this situation from a distance, there is a lot of signs of progress, there is a lot of support for Ukraine and so on. Could it be more and better? Of course. Would Ukraine get Tomahawks 2 years ago? The war would be over. I have no doubt. Americans shot several hundred Tomahawks on the deserts of Syria and Yemen. Well, they could destroy Russian refineries and few key industries in summer 23, and the war would be finished, because they will wage the war as long as they have capacities to wage the war. But you cannot wage the war without electricity, oil, gas, and a few other commodities.
Yeah. Now we come to the so many hands. Do you have a microphone? Okay. So, the gentleman here.
I'm Aveti Kulkasyan, the president of Pan'Europa Armenia. Actually, it's not a question, it's a comment. This is a message to people living in Western European countries. From physics, we remember there is a linear dependence between the size of the object and the distance between the viewer and the object. So the farther are you, the smaller is the object. Now, as our Georgian colleague said, devil, or some of you characterized as evil empire. Those people who live a bit farther from Russia, in their eyes, this devil becomes smaller, smaller, and smaller, farther you go. That's why my message is to all European nations, Western European nations, others, if you want to continue enjoy your nice life, you better listen to those who stand next to devil and they see full size the devil. Listen to Finns, listen to Estonians, listen to Latvians, listen to Ukrainians, listen to Georgians, to Armenians. Maybe they're saying something that makes sense. If you don't listen now, you'll be forced to listen later on, and you're going to learn that in a hard way. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this was more of the gentleman who takes the microphone. He's not here because he's texting on the phone. It was more a message to us, not a real question, so it's not necessary to answer, so I give the microphone to the gentleman here for the next question.
It's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kovac. That was absolutely brilliant panel. Thank you for moderating and for your questions, and the questions was absolutely essential. And the last one, I want to elaborate a little bit on the issue how to persuade Western and Central Europeans of why they should care, actually. Because I can understand them in a certain way, that why they should be very interested in what is really happening. We in Kiev, among our fellow experts, we usually say that Mr. Trump has scared Europeans much more than Mr. Putin did. So when Mr. Trump became a president, then Europeans started to do something, just gathering, like doing coalition of willing, well, never fulfilling, but still willing. So everything is very, very actively going. But I want to get back also to the issue of knowing and answering the question how we explain why and on what base we think our countries are European, what is really Europe. And my question is about whether we can build a certain difference between the European Union as the successor of the Union of Coal and Steel, just some kind of administrative and business union, and on the other hand, the community of the pan-European community. Because in my opinion, if we're talking about pan-European community, we're talking about idea of Europe. And talking about idea of Europe, I have one of my favorite films, Inception, of Christopher Nolan. And in this film, there is a narrative that idea doesn't have any borders. So idea can expand whatever you like it to expand. So my question to you, dear panelists, do you think that we can talk about Europeans and to discuss with them the issue that the idea of Europe that is basing of, for example, on Charter of Human Rights of the European Union, where we have the Article 1st, the right for dignity of a human being, whether we can talk to Europeans in scope of that we have to expand the idea of Europe. So all the countries, including, I like this first picture with the border of actually Europe on Ural and this. So whether we can say that a European idea and pan-European community as the core of this idea of Europe can be expanded till these geographical borders, including some parts of the Russian Federation. Thank you.
So who would like to react to this? It was almost two questions. The one was how do we develop Europe coming from the steel and coal union, and the second one, how do we the question for a European narrative, if I understand correctly. Who would like to react on that? Yeah?
Question is complicated indeed, and we here during the questioning had a chance to exchange opinions about Trump, about your comment on Trump. Later today we'll see if Europeans are afraid of Trump indeed, because if we'll get Nobel Prize later today, that will prove that Europeans are really scared of him. Because this is, of course, it's mocking. It's mocking of the very idea of Nobel Prize. But he did? Okay, you see, so this is, so you proved to be wrong, and Europe is right, because it's a courage which maybe the best way was explained in, I guess, 17th century, but Voltaire, who famously said, I disagree with you, but I'm ready to die for your right to express your opinion. Maybe it's not the best idea which was expressed in the human history, but your question was different. It's about Europe. So Europe is all about respecting the other, which is something unthinkable for some, I won't point, some other religions, some other cultures, including many Europeans and Americans as well. But the dominance of what we are fighting for is eventually, it's not the will to prove ourselves right. It's proof It's an attempt, historical attempt, to prove you're right, even if you are wrong. That is my definition and my attempt to answer your question.
Carlos? Yeah.
Okay, my name is Carlos Uriarte and I'm president of Pan'Europa Spain and I'm professor of law in Madrid. Well, I have several questions. The first one, it means when we talk about, because you have spoken a lot about the first part of the question of the title, when you have spoken about Europe's eastern border, but in my opinion not so much about the second part of the title, future relations with Russia or post-Russia. Then in this regard, first question, it means the issue of security depends on perceptions. Ukrainians, they don't feel themselves safe. Also, the rest of Europeans, we don't feel ourselves safe face Russia. But on the other hand, in the Russian rhetoric, they say the same. Then, in this regard, if we talk about a future peace scenario, although it's far away, but which should be the guarantees of security for Ukraine and which should be the guarantees of security for Russia, in your opinion? Second question, in this future relation with Russia or a post-Russia, which should be the future European security architecture? This future security architecture should include Russia or not? And my last question is, do you think that the war here in Ukraine could be the end, the final of the Russian Federation, as Afghanistan after 10 years was the end of the Soviet Union? These are my three concrete questions, and only, this is not a question, this is just an information, because maybe you have not read the news. Now we have a Nobel Prize, who is Maria Corina Machado, leader of the Venezuela opposition. It means that in this regard, in my opinion, it's a triumph of civil society, because Maria Corina Machado is a woman from the civil society and was not Trump. Only the Nobel Prize knows. But in my opinion, it was a good decision, because it means that we are civil society, we can play also an important role for our democracies and for the future of our common European project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos. David, you wanted directly to react on that.
Thank you, Carlos. If I correctly understood your first question, it was about what kind of security guarantees for Ukraine and for Russia. Nowadays, there are a lot of talks about security and economic financial guarantees for Ukraine, which is all important. But don't forget that guarantees are not always honored. Not only spoken, not only oral, but sometimes signed, sealed, stamped agreements and memoranda are violated. In fact, when it comes to Russia, the violation of agreement is more norms than an exception. Therefore, as of now, I don't see any other effective security guarantee for Ukraine as its full membership into NATO and into the EU. Okay, I understand that now it might be seemed not feasible at this moment, but it should not be taken out from the table. Option should stay, and process should be alive, including membership of NATO. If it is not feasible in a foreseeable future, no one should have a right to reject at this stage Ukraine's or any other country's membership. Let's recall when President Yeltsin demanded from President Clinton after the first expansion of NATO after Cold War, when three Visegrad countries joined, not to expand NATO on the territory of former Soviet Union, on which President Clinton said that I cannot decide for all others because it's a consensus-based organization, and second, I'm not in a mood to draw new dividing lines. So this option should stay open for Ukraine as well as for other countries who will to do it. As of Russia, what kind of security guarantees? What I will tell you now, it might sound a bit paradoxical, but the future of Russia, in my view, largely depends on Ukraine. When the war stops, after war stops, and Ukraine succeeds to transition its nation and its country from war to peace, to succeeds rebuild with the support of mostly now Europe, its economy, its institutions, and succeeds to build eventually democratic, sovereign, free, strong European country, then the moment for Russia, and there is also second condition, and if West conditions resumption of business as usual with Russia on the condition of Russia abandoning its imperial ambitions and internal reform. In that case, Russia might face moment of reckoning.
Jura and Yuri. First Yuri.
Я б хотів би дати трошки інший фокус відповіді на питання безпекових гарантій, тому що якщо, наприклад, ми говоримо про те, що Україна перемагає у війні з Росією, Росія дезінтегрується, то, на мою думку, питання про членство в НАТО України, якби безглуздо, бо майбутню архітектуру безпеки в регіоні буде формувати передовсім найсильніша армія Європи, якою буде Україна, якщо ми переможемо Росію. Як на мене, це... А якщо ми говоримо про те, що Росія в якійсь формі зберігається, то, власне, щитом Європи від Росії, знову ж таки, буде армія, яка стримує Росію, знову ж таки, Україна. І хоча, передовсім, ми вдячні всім нашим партнерам з Європи, з світу, які підтримують нас фінансово, зброєю і так далі, без цього ми б не вистояли, проте найбільшу ціну все ж таки зараз і фізично воює Україна, тому мені здається, що питання в цілому таке, треба трошки інший фокус на це, говорити про майбутню архітектуру безпеки, де Україна вже або є суб'єктом, або цієї архітектури просто не буде.
The only guarantee for the security of Ukraine is defeat of Russia. Defeat of Russia, how to define defeat of Russia? I define it as a collapse of Russian empire and its disintegration. Without the disintegration of Russia, Russian imperialism, which is planted deeply in the minds of Russian people, will not die. So for that reason, the disintegration is a key to the security in Europe, disintegration of Russia. You don't teach a tiger to be vegetarian. When I speak to students about the future of Russia, I ask them, name one European country bordering Russia which was not attacked by Russia over the last 100 years. And it's a tricky question because there is one such country, Norway. But because they only had 2 years border with Norway between 44 and 46, and then Norway joined NATO. But they attacked every other neighboring country, every other neighboring European country. Okay, that was a joke. And psychologically, it is a predatory animal. They have no other, that's deeply planted in their philosophy, in what they believe in. The Russian Empire stands on 3 feet. One is the military power and this myth of invincibility of Russia. It's a myth. They were defeated many times in the history, but the Russians believe they are unbeatable. The second is economic resources coming from the oil and gas export, which is being, the myth is being destroyed by Ukraine. The export of oil and gas is being destroyed by Ukraine. And the third is the myth of the great power, superpower myth, which is being destroyed. That's mental, deeply mentally. The final point of defeating this myth is the disintegration of Russia, and that is guarantee of the peaceful future for Europe, of security for Europe. There will be security challenges, but they will be completely different, and the framework for dealing with those challenges will be different than the NATO. NATO was created to defend Europe against Russia. When the Russia disappears, the NATO will become, well, temporarily irrelevant, and then it will find some other purpose. Just like in early 2000s, the main topic for NATO was not Russia, but climate change, which is a serious problem, but well, they had to rediscover Russia as a problem.
I have 3 questions now. The 3 last questions, Marco, Mr. Polico, and Mikola then. We collect it together. Put it up. Das ist ein Knopf, den du hinaufdrücken musst.
Dankeschön. Erstmal grüß Gott. Hi everyone, my name is Marko Kulik. I'm a representative of a pan-European movement of Ukraine. I'm a citizen of Чернівецький. I have a little comment. You talked about Chamberlain. You know, I think that this guy wanted also this Nobel Prize so badly. Maybe, and I think I started to understand Trump better. Maybe he just read his book How to Make Deals by Chamberlain instead of Churchill. This is a little remark. My question is about the vision of Kudnkovo-Hakalagi about the borders, and I'm so happy that Reinhard Kluczyk said what was written in the manifesto of Kudnkovo-Hakalagi, that you don't actually have a geographical border in the east of Europe, because we are talking about politics, we are talking about culture. My question would be the next one. How do you see, is really the eastern border of Europe there where the culture is, or where the European people, the population of Europe, is ready to keep their tanks? That's the question.
мене продовження цього циклу питань, де ж східний кордон Європи, але я спробую так його дуже вже сконцентрувати, можливо, треба трохи провокативно. Уявімо собі, що Росія розпалася. Однозначно, в більшості випадків ми будемо мати справу з авторитарними якимись пострежимами. Уявімо собі також, що на заході цього повстане держава з виборчою системою, з виборами. І до влади на цій частині можуть прийти, а швидше за все і прийдуть представники партій а-ля Пригожина, Гіркіна, якихось казаків, псевдолібералів, але це буде виборча демократія. І 100% можу запевнити, що ця виборча демократія буде вороже ставитись до України, тому що ми для них, як альтернатива, ми не можемо існувати по замовчуванню для них. Питання, де тоді, умовно кажучи, знову ж таки, східний кордон Європи, де?
The microphone goes to here in the second row, Mikula.
Доброго дня, я вдячний пане Райнхард і всім іншим за запрошення на цей поважний захід. Я представник наукової спільноти, я з Києва. Я фахівець в сфері біологічної, хімічної та екологічної безпеки, але вона також має важливе значення, і всі ті проблеми, які вирішуються, вони повинні вирішуватися в контексті системно. Я хотів би пару ремарок про те, що коли ми говоримо про Росію, то це треба, вже, як кажуть колеги-лікарі, що це діагноз. Я скажу чому. Це не вперше в історії, коли мій народ стикається з агресією Росії. Перша, така важлива віха – це битва під Оршею. Згадайте часи Костянтина Острозького, коли, скориставшися певною політичною, це коли був Велике Литовське князівство, ситуацію, і Василь III вирішив захопити наші землі, послав військо, і тоді, мобілізувавши народ, сили і так далі, Костянтин Острозький під Оршею розбив московитів, захватив всіх бояр, і коли запропонував викупити, то відома фраза «а наших там нет». Всі пам'ятають, коли Путін там, він не оригінальний, ще Василь III сказав «а моїх там нет», тобто бояр і так далі. Це перший випадок. Другий. Візьмемо Конотоп, пізніше значно. Це тоді, це Петро Конашевич, або Сагайдачний, коли розбив під Конотопом вдруге московитів, дійшов до Москви, зайшов в Москву і далі, вони втекли аж за Урал. Нема, то і нема. І назад повернувся. Я хотів підкреслити, ми з чужих земель не захоплювали і так далі. І це, відповідно, третій раз і так далі. Я хочу, що потрібно нам, українцям, для європейців доказати, бо ми хочемо бути своїми серед своїх. Про те, що ми єдині. Ми єдині. Наведу такий факт. Не так давно був випадок, коли росіяни намагалися Скрипалів отруїти. Їх життя висіло буквально кілька годин і так далі у цьому. Україна підставила свої плече. Це говорить про хай-тек, про високі технології, і вони залишилися живими. Тобто відповідний антидот і так далі, тому подібне. От у мене таке і запитання. Що, як на вашу думку, необхідно, щоб все ж таки, переборовши оці всі перепони, які є, да, ну так само, як і інші, як представники дружніх нам країн, і Грузії, і Вірменії, і Молдови, і так далі, щоб ми були в єдиній пан'європейській спільноті. Дякую за увагу.
Thank you. So, this was the last questions. The first two questions were about the eastern border. I think everybody will react on that because it's also your closing words. The last point was about the future, how will we be together in Europe. Who wants to start? Juraj? Try to be short, in 10 minutes we should have coffee break.
I will try. I will answer, or try answer the first question, I outlined geographical perspective, but Europe is cultural phenomenon, and I believe that the borders of Europe are the belonging to Europe is defined by the commitment of people, be it ethnic group or a regional entity or any other, to basic European values. The European Union is based on key values: value of freedom, value of democracy, commitment to the rule of law. And as long as I don't know where are Kalmyks who are Mongol. Yeah, Mongol nation speaking Mongol language, but living in geographical Europe. If there is once independent Kalmykia west of Caspian Sea, whether they define themselves as Europeans or not, my answer is, well, are they committed to democracy? Are they committed to the rule of law? Are they committed to the ideas of freedom? And if that is fulfilled, then I think if they apply for the EU membership, they should be considered as a Europeans and allowed to join European Union. So cultural approach.
Я дуже коротко хочу відповісти щодо неможливості співіснування майбутньої маленької Росії з Україною, прикладом Франції і Німеччини, які все своє життя між собою, існування до створення Європейського Союзу воювали, а створення Європи на певних цінностях, на певних механізмах забезпечило їхнє мирне співіснування, тому я не бачу тут нічого неможливого.
To make the answer short, I would like to refer my own surname. It's difficult for your ear, Khazmalian, but you would understand it if you know religion, because it's the same word as religious term which you know in Greek, schisma. Schism means split. So in Armenian, Khazmalian and Greek, schisma is the same word. It's about split between Orthodox and Catholic churches, split between churches. So my answer is, where is the eastern border of Europe? We should split ourselves as a Christian civilization, as European civilization, from what we means not geographically, but in terms of values, Asia. So as Kuchma said, Ukraine is not Russia. What is not Russia? What is not Asia? We are starting from this split. Thanks.
Future of Europe, the boundary of Eastern Europe will largely be determined by how the war in Ukraine will end. It will end, of course, but how? On what conditions? West once defeated evil in 1990. Soviet Union disappeared, but on what conditions? There were no conditions, just disappeared. But it took less than 20 years to come back. So in order not to repeat the previous mistakes, the end of the war should be on conditions that will prevent the re-emergence of Russian imperial ambition. So how it will be drafted, I don't know, but that should be the central element while discussing the document on which this war will be ended.
Thank you very much. I think we agree that Europe is a civilization of culture, and this civilization of culture also defines the border of Europe. And that means, of course, and Euro mentioned that with one example, but there are also others. Think about the Pskov region, which is now part of Russia, which has been part of Hanse in former times, etc., etc. We could talk about several other regions, just to mention this one. So Europe should be open for them to integrate if the situation comes that Russia is disordered, not Russia, let's talk about Moscovian Empire, if this is dissolved. And in that civilization and culture and democracy and freedom and human rights and rule of law, I think we will be together in the future. Thank you, gentlemen, here on the panel for the discussion. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, for your patience. Nobody felt asleep as far as I could see, so we did a good job. Thanks for the questions, thanks for the comments. Now we have a coffee break, and this is for how many minutes? When do we proceed? Wann geht's weiter?
Дякую, справді дуже було цікаво і дуже гарно. Я лише одне доповнення, якщо Райнгард мені дозволить. До ваших слів. У 1923 році Колін Гове Калергі опублікував «Пан'європа маніфест». Там чітко стояло, Європа стоїть перед війною з Росією, в якій або Європа переможе, або програє. І його слова виявилися пророчими, і зараз це відбувається тут. Перше. І друге, до честі Пан'європи, Отто фон Габсбург весь час попереджав, що з приходом Путіна до влади Європа стоїть перед війною. І ми через те на сьогоднішній день користуємося такою популярністю, я маю на увазі пан'європейський рух, що ми були одними з небагатьох в Європі, хто послідовно підтримував Україну і з іншого боку попереджав про небезпеку війни з Росією. Дякую всім. Ми йдемо на обід, на каву-брейк і відповідно в 16-й годині сюди повертаємося. Дякую.
Mark, because Yura announced that he will have his book here in Ukrainian language, so it is here, and I think the first copy is going to the President of Panaropa, Ukraine.